Satoru Gojo is one of the most beloved and simped for characters in recent years, which feels sort of reminiscent to how people used to feel about Levi from Attack on Titan. However, not only is Gojo really loved, he's also quite possibly the strongest character in Jujutsu Kaisen. But just how strong is this pretty-eyed boy? Today we're going to talk about who exactly he is and what his powers are, so let's dive into how strong is Satoru Gojo actually. There will be spoilers in this video, so you have been warned. Before we get into how strong he is, we're going to need to look at a tad bit of history on this sexy white-haired man. On December 7th of 1989, a young baby Gojo was born into the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, and I kid you not, his birth changed the entire course of the world. We learn in chapter 96, during the middle of the Shibuya incident, that Gojo's birth led to an increase in power level for all of the curses in Japan. Cursed users at the time were able to have free roam and do as they pleased, which included some very corrupt things such as human experimentation and killing civilians. However, this changed completely after his birth. His lone existence single-handedly changed absolutely everything. Due to his presence, there was an immediate bounty put on his head for millions of yen since he was the first child in 400 years to inherit both the Limitless, which is an ability that allows whoever wields it to distort both space and time at their leisure, and the Six Eyes, which is a type of jujutsu that someone is born with in their eyes. I'll talk about both of these more later on since they're both very important to why Gojo is so busted. Because of his rare assets, many people try to go after him and claim his bounty. However, when they attempted to, they were paralyzed in fear from the overwhelming presence of his cursed energy. This made a lot of the corrupt cursed users go into hiding while Gojo existed, since they were afraid just from looking at him. So already, Gojo is really strong, as just his presence as a child is near enough to instill fear into any of the cursed energy users. Hell, his birth raised the entire ceiling for cursed energy in the world. The author for the manga, Gege Akutami, has noted before in interviews that he really enjoys having balance in his story, which is a little whack, considering how powerful some of the people in this series are, but that's not the point. Since Gojo is so unbelievably powerful, his birth alone changed the balance of the world. So to balance the offset of cursed energy now in the world, cursed spirits started to become much more powerful. This was also boosted by Sukuna's fingers popping up around Japan and the struggles of the current day and age of humanity. Since there are a lot of things that happen in the modern day, curses naturally would get stronger due to how much negativity exists. But yeah, baby and kid Gojo was enough to flip the entire world upside down, and it only goes up from here. Flash forward about 15 or so years, and now Gojo is a second year at Jujutsu High. He's on a squad with Geto Tsurugu and Ieri Shoko, and his teacher later becomes the current principal of Jujutsu High. He's pretty strong by now, and his reputation is certainly known among the Jujutsu sorcerers. However, he is not the overpowered super strong Gojo we know just yet. Their squad is assigned to go and protect the current vessel for Master Tengen, who is a cursed spirit that resides within a tomb known as Star Corridor. Tengen upholds barriers that protect Jujutsu High's locations from being seen by both regular humans and from cursed spirits. The reason he needs a vessel is to merge his consciousness to a new host so that his current self doesn't evolve into an omnipotent being and spiral out of control. So they managed to go and secure the new host just fine, albeit there were a little bit of hiccups along the way, but they still did it pretty easily. They bring the new host back to Jujutsu High in Tokyo, and Gojo is greeted with a katana right through his chest. Now would be a good time to explain the Limitless ability Gojo can use. Limitless, at its core, is an ability to stop things by using a shit ton of math. Its neutral state is known as infinity, and serves the purpose of never allowing anything to get close to the user of this ability by creating an invisible barrier. When something gets close to it or hits this barrier, the user divides its acceleration an infinite amount of times, basically making it appear as if the object has completely stopped, meaning it will never hit the user of this ability. His ability is hidden by the Six Eyes he has, which allows him to compute everything within his brain quickly and down to an atomic level. This power is sort of similar to accelerators from the Index franchise. It's really weird how OP characters tend to be the ones that involve a lot of math in their abilities. It's safe to say that Gojo is not used to being injured, especially a serious injury, so getting stabbed through the chest seems to have completely thrown everybody off. The man who stabbed him is Toji Fushiguro, who some may recognize from his name. He's Megumi's father. He's well known in the Jujutsu world as the Sorcerer Killer, since he is a bounty hunter and is capable of killing countless Jujutsu sorcerers. The reason he was able to harm Gojo was because he waited until he was tired from the ability Limitless, and he went in with an object that had no cursed energy attached to it so that Gojo would not sense it at all. The two fight, but for the first time presumably ever, Gojo loses, and almost dies on top of that. He's stabbed through the throat with an object called the Inverted Sword of Heaven, which is imbued with cursed energy that when punctured into a sorcerer will completely turn off their cursed techniques, meaning Gojo's Limitless and Six Eyes would shut down. Toji presumably then leaves Gojo to die, which was a massive mistake. In his near-death state, Gojo uses and masters what is referred to as a reverse cursed technique. In the Jujutsu world, this technique is incredibly hard to use, because it essentially is the user manipulating their cursed energy with another cursed energy. What this means in simple terms is they're basically multiplying a negative by a negative to in turn make a positive, in this case resulting in almost always healing the host. So due to Gojo nearly dying, he was able to use and finally master reverse cursed energy, as well as becoming enlightened to what the core of cursed energy is. We know this for certain because while in the sky, he points to the ground and says, quote, "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one." This is a direct reference to Buddhism, as Buddha Sakyamuni said this after being birthed from his mother. Gege, the author of JJK, has said in interviews that Gojo said this more as an egotistical statement, but regardless, Gojo has become enlightened. There are a few parallels to Gojo and Buddhism actually, such as his birth changing everything in the world, his enlightenment, and him teaching at Jujutsu High to spread his teachings to the younger generation. It was at this moment that he was able to use an ability he could never use called Purple, and that he became an untouchable monster forever in the Jujutsu world. Basically, Toji fucked up and turned Gojo into something like a god. Now that we're basically caught up to where Gojo currently is in terms of the manga and anime, let's dive a little bit more into his abilities. As I mentioned earlier, he possesses the ability called Limitless, which is passed down the Gojo family's heritage. It again allows them to manipulate space around them through cursed energy, and comes in three main forms as well as one form that isn't standard and isn't very well known. Infinity is the passive form or the neutral form of Limitless, which creates this invisible barrier around Gojo. We've seen it in play many times, such as his fight against Jogo, when someone tried to splash tea in his face, the second opening, him walking over ants, and when his barrier was starting to get overpowered from domain amplification. He can even use it to fly. As I said earlier, he basically creates a space around his body that when something would come close, he can divide its acceleration by infinity so that it never touches him. Again, in simple terms, this means he can just slow stuff down so much so that when it comes near him, he can make it appear as if it stops moving completely. This was compared in chapter 69 nice. To Achilles and the tortoise, also known as the Zeno paradox. I'm going to try and explain this as easily as possible because it is actually a little complicated, but basically the paradox is from Zeno and states that if a tortoise was given a head start in a race against the Greek hero Achilles, no matter how much distance was covered or how small the gap between them would get, the tortoise would always have a slight lead in the race, meaning Achilles would never be able to overtake the tortoise. Gojo's infinity works a little like this, meaning no matter how close an object might get to hitting him, it will never truly touch him unless he stops using infinity. Now the first standard form of Limitless is called Lapse Blue, which is kind of like a gigantic magnet in a way. Basically, by using the Limitless to create a space using a lot of cursed energy, it forces real space to fill in the gaps created since cursed energy is a negative. This is why I compare it to a magnet. By creating a negative, it draws in the positive in a magnetic or gravitational manner. The more cursed energy that Gojo pours into Lapse Blue, the stronger the pull. An example would be when he used it against Juzo during the Goodwill arc. His body began to pull inward to fill the now empty space, causing his limbs to explode and he himself to almost explode as well. Since he has to create negative space, this means that he has to calculate negative numbers into reality, which takes out a lot of his brain power and will tire him quickly. The second standard form of Limitless is actually a much stronger form of Blue, where he maxes his cursed energy output into it. This allows him to take the gravitational aspect of blue to a new level where he completely creates his own center of gravity wherever he decides at will. This is very similar to that of a black hole, as it pulls everything in a certain amount of space together and crushes it in a ball. He used this against Toji, who has been used for a lot of limit testing of Gojo's powers apparently, this poor guy. The third standard form of Limitless is red, one that you guys are probably very familiar with already. While blue acts as a magnet, red acts as a repellent. Using the reversing skills he picked up thanks to learning the cursed technique, he inverts blue using positive cursed energy to repel absolutely everything. We can see this being used against his fight in the anime with Jogo, where red blows everything away and causes a ton of destruction. It's actually far more destructive because of how it pushes outwards instead of inwards. This also isn't super relevant, but Mappa outdid themselves. This looks so badass. But yeah, besides that, red pushes out very strongly, blue pushes inward very strongly. The final form of Limitless, which isn't standard and is by far his most powerful ability, is known as the Hollow Technique, Purple. Purple is a technique that only a few people in his lineage know about, and Gojo refers to it as being born from colliding both infinities, which are red and blue, in the form of motion and reversal. He combines the two techniques together with the snap of his finger, which by both repelling matter and pulling it into a black hole, it creates a singularity that quite literally erases anything in its path from existence. He uses it to blow a hole in half of Toji's body, and he uses it in the anime to do some crazy things as well, like almost destroying half of a forest. All of Gojo's powers act as a form of gravity manipulation, with him acting as the center of it. Now, his domain expansion, known as Unlimited or Infinite Void, is fucking awesome. Infinite Void, as seen against his fight with Jogo, is the ability to pull whoever he desires into a pocket dimension completely created by him that looks like it's in light speed from Star Wars. Infinite Void overwhelms their senses with everything from smells to sight to information, everything imaginable, while also at the same time absolutely nothing in an endless stream for as long as Gojo desires. This leads to whoever is in it to become completely unable to move due to information overload. Gojo himself is fine from this, as well as whoever he touches while casting it, but anyone else in the vicinity is in deep trouble. The domain is extremely powerful, as we've seen it able to overpower Jogo's domain very quickly, and it is in fact so powerful that even exposure of it to a normal human for 0.2 seconds would force them into rehab for 2 months. 2 months! So that means if they were exposed to it for a actual second, they would be in rehab for 10 months. Holy shit, man. This domain is busted, and is seriously one of the coolest things in the series. What pulls all this together is what we briefly mentioned earlier, the 6 eyes. Now, I'll be honest, out of the almost 200 chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen, not a whole lot is known about these eyes, and how they work. We've had all of his abilities explained very well, like blue, red, and purple, but this one so far is still a mystery. However, the one thing we do know, thanks to Yuta, is that the 6 eyes let Gojo reduce the amount of cursed energy he needs for a technique. Think of an item in a game that makes it less mana or energy for you to use your ultimate. That's how Gojo's eyes work. He needs less cursed energy to use his abilities, and because of this, he hardly ever, or maybe never, has run out of cursed energy in a fight. It's also suggested a few times that his eyes allow him to compute equations in his brain at a very fast rate, as well as see the world in equations relating to mass, speed, and energy for both mathematics and science. His eyes also let him see cursed energy in very vivid detail, like he could with Yuji, which allows him to tell exactly what type a person uses. It's suggested he can use them to see over very wide and large distances in a very accurate detail similar to that of a hawk. Because of how strong his eyes are, they can lead to him getting exhausted quicker, which is why he usually has them covered. This is why he wears sunglasses in some spots, and they even allow him to see through fabrics on his face like bandages and blindfolds, which is why he wears those. So, in short, the 6 eyes take what are already strong abilities and amplify them by 10, making him go from strong to broken. He has to use almost no effort for anything. On top of his already strong abilities, he's extremely well versed in hand-to-hand combat. He is very strong physically, so his punches hit hard, and he can run fast while also having quick reflexes. And this is all on top of the fact of him being extremely intelligent, allowing him to capitalize on his abilities in very creative ways. He can also utilize techniques such as Black Flash, and he can create a barrier called Curtain, which can restrain people in certain spaces or keep them from ever entering them in the first place, as seen in the recent movie. Now, as far as weaknesses go, he has 4, which we've already discussed 2 of them, but I'll go ahead and list them again anyways. The first way is to get him inside a domain, because the attacks in domains will always actually hit him, because he cannot use his cursed energy inside of them. The second is using a weapon that nullifies cursed energy, such as the Inverted Spear of Heaven. Once he was stabbed with this, he was not able to fight back at all. The third way of beating him is waiting until its infinity is down, because when it is down, he is completely vulnerable as he no longer has this barrier around him. And the fourth, as I mentioned earlier, is by overpowering him with domain amplification, since he cannot handle that much power being used against him at once. While these weaknesses do exist, they are very minute and very hard weaknesses to abuse, so he never usually has to worry about them very much, except for domain amplification. That one is pretty hard hitting. Now, with all of that laid out, how strong is Gojo actually? Well, Gojo, to put it quite simply, is the ceiling for power in Jujutsu Kaisen. He is the strongest character in the series hands down by physical means, and when considering his abilities, he is virtually an unstoppable force. Everyone in the Jujutsu world is afraid of him for good reason, as no one could beat him in a fight in his current state. And they are so afraid of him that the only way they could possibly beat him was by sealing him inside of a cursed object. Even through this, they haven't beaten him. They're merely putting him at bay for a small amount of time. He will come out and kick their asses anyways. His 6 eyes make it to where he uses little to quite possibly no cursed energy at all for his abilities. He always has a barrier around his body to protect him from anything in the form of infinity, and he can effortlessly do almost anything he wants to do. Gojo is entirely and absolutely broken, and I always have fun referring to him as an attractive one-punch man. The only person that might be able to take Gojo on in a fight could be full power Sukuna, but even then it's hard to say. All we know for now is that Gojo, in his own series, is the strongest character, with no one else really coming even close.